2 days, 2 breakfasts, and 1 astonishing lesson. I, Dennis, stood in my small kitchen on the morning of October 26, 2017, with soft sunlight filtering through the curtains, illuminating 2 golden bananas and 2 Hershey's cookies and cream bars on the table. For a diabetic like me, every meal isn't just about filling my stomach, it's a silent battle where every gram of carbohydrate can either spike my blood sugar to dangerous heights or keep me safely in the controlled zone. Bananas, the healthy fruit packed with potassium and vitamins, faced off against candy, the enemy condemned by every diet, both carrying about 28 grams of carbs per unit. Ready to challenge my body? I wondered, and perhaps you're wondering too, for a diabetic, what blood sugar level becomes a threat? 150, 200, or even higher? 2 days, 2 breakfasts. One day I'd eat bananas, the next day candy, and the numbers on my meter would tell an unexpected story. Have you ever wondered what really happens when your blood sugar shoots up to 222 in just an hour? Or could candy possibly be gentler than bananas, as I once believed? Join me in this experiment, because the answer didn't just change how I eat, it might make you rethink your breakfast today. Which one do you think won? Day 1. Bananas and curiosity. I've always liked experimenting, not dangerous or crazy experiments, mind you, but small tests with my own body. I have diabetes, and one way I've learned to manage it is by tracking how my blood sugar changes after eating different things. Some days, I'd try a low-carb breakfast, like eggs and avocado, and check my blood sugar an hour later. Other days, I'd eat a carb-heavy meal just to see how my body reacts. I call it comparing, putting 2 things side by side to see which wins and which loses in the battle to keep my blood sugar stable. That day was October 26, 2017. I stood in my little kitchen, the early sunlight slipping through the window, shining on the dining table where I'd placed 2 perfectly ripe bananas. They looked flawless, smooth peels, a sweet fragrance wafting out like an invitation. Bananas. Who doesn't know them? They're the poster child for health, full of potassium, vitamins, and minerals. People often told me, Dennis, if you have to eat something sugary, pick fruit. It's natural, it's better than candy. But I'd always had my doubts. Bananas have sugar, natural sugar. Sure, but sugar is still sugar, right? And for someone with insulin resistance like me, I wondered if they were really as safe as everyone claimed. I decided to test it. I'd eat 2 bananas for breakfast, totaling about 55 to 60 grams of carbs. A hefty amount for someone like me who usually keeps carbs low each day. The plan was simple. I'd measure my blood sugar before eating. Then check again 30 minutes and an hour later to see how much it spiked. Tomorrow, I'd do the same, but swap the bananas for 2 Hershey's cookies and cream bars, the stuff everyone unanimously labels as a health enemy. Both had roughly the same carb content, about 28 grams per unit, so I figured it'd be a fair comparison. Would fruit really outshine candy when it came to blood sugar? I was about to find out. I sat down and peeled the first banana. It was soft, sweet, and I'll admit, it felt nice to eat something fresh in the morning. The second one disappeared just as quickly. Before eating, I'd checked my blood sugar, 106 milligrams per deciliter, a stable, normal number for me after a night of fasting. I set the meter down, glanced at the clock, and waited. 30 minutes passed in a flash. I felt a slight surge of energy, probably the sugar from the bananas kicking in. I grabbed my meter, pricked my finger, and the number popped up, 192 milligrams per deciliter. I blinked and checked again. No mistake. My blood sugar had shot up 86 points in just half an hour. I muttered to myself, wow, these 2 bananas aren't messing around. But I was still curious. Had it peaked yet, or would it climb higher? I decided not to wait the full hour as planned and took another reading right after. An hour after my banana breakfast, I sat down with the meter again. This time, the number nearly knocked me over, 222 milligrams per deciliter. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of amazement and confusion. A 116-point spike in 1 hour. That was the highest I'd ever recorded in all my blood sugar tracking. Those 2 little, lovely, vitamin-packed bananas I thought were friends, suddenly turned into formidable foes. I shook my head and told myself, if anyone still doubts I have insulin resistance, this is the clearest proof. I stood up, pacing around the kitchen, trying to make sense of what had happened. Bananas have natural sugars, fructose and glucose, and I knew they could raise blood sugar. But this much? I started to wonder. Did those 2 bananas have more carbs than I'd estimated? They were pretty big, and ripeness could affect the sugar content. Either way, I knew tomorrow would be even more interesting. If bananas could do this, what would 2 Hershey's bars do to me? I felt a mix of excitement and dread as I thought about the next test. Here's the translation of the remaining text into English. Day 2. Candy and the surprise. The next morning, I woke up with mixed feelings. After the shock from the 2 bananas, I was still reeling. The number 222 kept swirling in my head, a warning that my body doesn't tolerate large amounts of carbs lightly. But I'd committed to this experiment, and I'm not one to back out halfway. On the kitchen table, instead of bananas, there were now 2 Hershey's cookies and cream bars, ivory white candy bars with a creamy, cookie-scented filling. They looked tempting, but also guilty. Who doesn't know candy is the bad guy? From low-carb diets to South Beach, from vegans to nutritionists, everyone unanimously condemns candy, yet it's everywhere, at supermarket checkouts, convenience stores, a temptation impossible to resist. I picked up a bar and read the nutrition label, 28 grams of carbs per bar. Nearly the same as a medium to large banana. 2 bars would give me about 56 grams of carbs, equivalent to the 2 bananas from yesterday. But there was one big difference. Candy has almost no fiber. While the bananas had about 6 grams of fiber between them. Fiber usually slows sugar absorption. So in theory, candy could spike my blood sugar faster. I told myself, today's probably going to be worse than yesterday. I've seen what bananas did, candy. Oh boy, I'm about to torture myself. I checked my blood sugar before eating. 106 milligrams per deciliter. Identical to yesterday. I took a deep breath and bit into the first piece. The creamy filling melted in my mouth. Sweet and rich. A completely different sensation from the fresh taste of bananas. The second bar vanished just as quickly, and I started the countdown. In my mind, I braced myself for a terrifying number. I imagined my blood sugar shooting up to 250, maybe even 300. Who knows with candy, right? 30 minutes later, I tested again. The number appeared. 151 milligrams per deciliter. I frowned and muttered, wait, only a 45-point increase? Compared to the 192 from the bananas. This was a huge difference. I wondered if something was wrong with the meter. But it was working fine. I decided to wait another 30 minutes for the final result. An hour passed, and I sat down again, pricked my finger, and looked at the screen. 169 milligrams per deciliter. I could hardly believe my eyes. A 63-point increase, high, yes, but far lower than the 116-point spike from the bananas. I burst out laughing, both surprised and bewildered. 2 Hershey's bars gentler on me than 2 bananas? What's going on here? I stepped out onto the porch, sat on an old wooden chair, sipped black coffee, and thought it over. All my assumptions had been flipped upside down. I'd been certain that candy, with its refined sugar and zero fiber, would be a blood sugar destroyer. Yet my body handled it better than the bananas. I started analyzing. Could the fat in the candy, from the cream and chocolate, have slowed the sugar absorption? Or did yesterday's bananas actually have more carbs than I'd calculated, due to their size or ripeness? Whatever it was, this result was a massive shock. The lesson from 2 breakfasts. After 2 days of testing, I sat down in front of my camera, turned on the lights, and started recording this story for my YouTube channel. Beat Diabetes. I wanted to share it not to brag, but to help people like me, those struggling with blood sugar and the daily choices about food. I recounted every detail. How I ate 2 bananas and watched my blood sugar soar to 222. Then the next day ate 2 candy bars and it stopped at 169. I admitted I didn't fully understand why. Maybe bananas aren't as consistent as candy. Natural fruit is harder to measure precisely than processed food. Maybe my body reacts differently to fructose than to refined sugar. But I didn't want to turn this into a perfect scientific study. I'd tortured my body enough with these 2-carb-heavy breakfasts. And I just wanted to get back to my familiar low-carb meals: eggs, avocado, greens. So, what was the biggest lesson I learned? First, for me, bananas are a big problem. I'd suspected it for a while, but the 222 cemented it in my mind. And it's not just bananas, most fruits, despite their nutrients, don't get a free pass when it comes to blood sugar. I told my viewers, don't assume fruit is safe just because it's natural. Sugar is still sugar, and for diabetics, it can do harm. Second, I realized everyone's story is different. What happened to me, bananas worse than candy, might not apply to you. The only way to know is to test yourself. I encourage people to buy a blood sugar meter, check after meals, and see how their bodies respond. That's the real power. Understanding yourself and making choices based on data, not assumptions. Finally, I found a glimmer of hope. I'm not a helpless victim of diabetes. No one forced me to eat bananas or candy. That was my choice. And the consequence was spiking blood sugar. But if I'd chosen 2 avocados or some celery with cheese instead of bananas, I know the numbers would have been much prettier. We have control, and that's what I wanted to convey. A conclusion from my kitchen. As I turned off the camera, the afternoon sunlight had faded outside the window. I smiled, thinking about this journey. 2 days, 2 breakfasts, and a lesson I'll never forget. I'm not encouraging anyone to eat candy instead of bananas. Neither is a daily choice for me anymore. But this experiment taught me that the truth sometimes defies expectations. And the best way to live well with diabetes is to listen to your own body. If you ask me today, nearly 8 years after that experiment, I still keep up the habit of checking my blood sugar after meals. I still make videos, still share, and still believe each of us can find our own path to beating this disease. Bananas or candy? For me, the answer doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I've learned to choose what works best for me.